A house left untouched. Dishes on the counter. The scent of dinner still clinging to the air. 2 bowls of popcorn sitting on the couch, as if waiting for their owners to return. A home filled with life, until it wasn't. No signs of struggle. No desperate calls for help. Just silence. And then, nothing. 4 people. 2 adults. 2 children. Gone. A car found miles away, doors locked, keys missing. Clues scattered like fragments of a puzzle no one could solve. Theories spun wildly, an escape, a fresh start, a decision made in secret. Yet the truth was far from hopeful. It lay buried beneath the sand, hidden for years. 3 years after they disappeared, the McStay family was found. Or rather, what was left of them. Buried in the Mojave Desert. A father. A mother. 2 little boys who never had a chance to grow up. Who did this? Why? And how did a man they trusted become their executioner? This is a story of betrayal. Of greed. Of a crime so brutal, so callous, that even seasoned investigators struggled to comprehend it. This is the true story of the McStay family murders. A family of 4. A father who worked hard, a mother who adored her children, and 2 little boys who had their whole lives ahead of them. Joseph McStay was a dreamer. A self-made businessman who built a successful company selling custom decorative water fountains. His work ethic was relentless, his vision clear. He wasn't just providing for his family, he was building a legacy. Summer McStay, his wife, was his equal in ambition and love for their children. She dedicated herself to creating a warm, nurturing home. Her world revolved around her boys. If Joseph was the provider, Summer was the protector. Johnny and Joseph Jr. were inseparable. Curious, energetic, full of life. At just 4 and 3 years old, they had a future brimming with possibilities. A future that would never come to be. Fallbrook, California. A small, close-knit community known for its avocado groves and quiet neighborhoods. It wasn't the kind of place where families vanished. It wasn't the kind of place where murder happened. Joseph and Summer had only lived here for a few months. They had plans. Plans to renovate, plans to grow their family, plans for a life they would never get to live. This was supposed to be their sanctuary. A home filled with laughter, bedtime stories, and family dinners. Instead, it became the last place they were seen alive. February 4, 2010. 7:47 p.m. The last confirmed sighting of the McStay family. Their SUV leaving their home. No one knows where they were going. No one knows why. Days pass. Then weeks. Their phones go silent. Their bank accounts untouched. Their home, left eerily undisturbed. The scene felt frozen in time. As if they had simply walked away in the middle of an ordinary night. For 3 years, their disappearance would be a mystery. Speculation ran wild. Had they fled to Mexico? Had they been kidnapped? Had they simply walked away from their lives? No one knew. No one had answers. Until November 11, 2013. I think I found something. There's bones out here. Human bones. 3 years after they disappeared, the McStay family was found. Murdered. Buried in 2 shallow graves in the Mojave Desert. What happened to them? Who was responsible? And why? The search for answers was only beginning. And when the truth came out, it was worse than anyone could have imagined. Thursday, February 4, 2010. A day that should have been like any other for the McStay family. A day that started normally, and ended with a mystery that would haunt investigators for years. 1:24 p.m. Joseph speaks with his business associate, Charles Chase Merritt. The call lasts 17 minutes. They discuss an upcoming project. Nothing seems out of the ordinary. 2:02 p.m. Joseph sends a follow-up message, "Call me back later. Have to pick up Summer and the kids." That was the last time anyone ever heard from Joseph McStay. By 5:47 p.m., Summer's cell phone stops transmitting. By 8:28 p.m., Joseph's phone pings a tower near their home for the last time. Then, nothing. No one knows who was behind the wheel. And from that moment forward, the McStay family was never seen alive again. February 13, 2010, 9 days after the McStays were last seen, Joseph's brother, Michael, visits the house. What he finds raises more questions than answers. The home is undisturbed. There are no signs of forced entry, no signs of struggle. In the sink, a half-eaten meal sits untouched. On the counter, a carton of eggs is left out, rotting. 2 bowls of popcorn rest on the couch, as if the children had been in the middle of a movie when something interrupted them. The family's beloved dogs had been left alone without food or water. A sign that whatever happened, wasn't planned. And then, there was the most chilling discovery of all, the family's passports, credit cards, and Summer's purse, untouched. Wherever they had gone, they hadn't taken the things they would need to survive. February 8, 2010. A breakthrough, authorities locate the McStay family's vehicle. Their white Isuzu Trooper is found abandoned in a parking lot near the U.S.-Mexico border in San Isidro. There are no signs of a struggle. No fingerprints, no blood. No indication of who drove it here. Investigators review security footage from the border. In the grainy images, a family of 4 appears to cross into Mexico. Was it the McStay family? Had they left voluntarily? Authorities consider the possibility that Joseph and Summer took their children to Mexico. The theory gains traction when they find searches on Joseph's computer. What documents do children need to travel to Mexico? But nothing about this case made sense. The McStays had no known ties to Mexico. Their bank accounts remained untouched. Their loved ones insisted they would never just leave without telling anyone. And then, silence. Months passed. Then years. No sign of the McStay family. No new leads. No answers. For 3 years, the case grew cold. Theories ranged from a voluntary disappearance to something far more sinister. Then, in November 2013, the desert revealed its secret. The motorcyclist's chilling discovery in the desert. How forensic evidence led to Charles Chase Merritt. The moment investigators realized the truth. Let me know if you want any refinements before we continue. As days turned into weeks and weeks into months, investigators scrambled to piece together what had happened to the McStay family. With no clear evidence of foul play, they had to explore every possibility. One of the first theories authorities considered was that the McStay family had left voluntarily. The biggest clue? The surveillance footage from the border crossing. Did the McStays willingly leave their lives behind and cross into Mexico? Investigators began digging into Joseph's background, searching for anything that might suggest he was planning to disappear. When detectives discovered this search in Joseph's browser history, it seemed to support the idea that he had planned to take his family to Mexico. We had to ask the question, did Joseph McStay take his family to Mexico voluntarily? Was this a planned move? My brother would never just take off like that. Not without telling me. Not without telling our mom. It doesn't make sense. The McStays had just moved into their new home in Fallbrook. Unpacking was still in progress. The idea that they had planned to leave everything behind didn't sit right. Why would a family go through the trouble of moving into a new house, buying new furniture, setting up their lives, only to abandon it all without a word? Summer's passport, credit cards, and personal belongings were left behind. Even more suspicious, their bank accounts remained untouched. If they had fled, why hadn't they withdrawn any money? Authorities reviewed the border surveillance footage again and again. But there was one problem: despite the resemblance, the video was too grainy to confirm if it was truly the McStay family. It was an uncertain lead, and it led nowhere. As time passed, new theories emerged, ones that painted a darker picture. Could the McStays have been targeted? If so, why? Investigators found no signs of forced entry. No shattered windows, no broken locks. Whatever had happened that night, the McStays had either let someone in, or they had left willingly. This was not a normal disappearance. There were no ransom notes. No phone calls. No demands. It was as if they had simply vanished. Joseph McStay ran a successful business designing custom water fountains. By all accounts, he was a hard-working entrepreneur, but as detectives dug deeper, they found cracks in his professional world. One of Joseph's closest business associates was Charles Chase Merritt. A skilled welder, Merritt worked with Joseph on several projects. He was also one of the last people to speak with him before the family disappeared. "Joseph was my best friend. I was devastated when they went missing. I had no idea what happened to them." Phone records revealed something disturbing. On February 4, the day the McStays vanished, Chase Merritt was the last person to call Joseph McStay. And just days after the disappearance, Chase began withdrawing thousands of dollars from Joseph's business account. It was a discovery that would later prove critical in solving the case. But at the time, with no bodies, no crime scene, and no direct evidence linking anyone to foul play, the case remained a mystery. For 3 years, the case remained unsolved. No phone calls, no new evidence, no answers. The McStays had simply disappeared. Until November 2013. When a motorcyclist made a discovery that shattered everything investigators thought they knew. 2 shallow graves. Human remains. And the truth that had been buried beneath the sand. The discovery of the McStay family's remains in the Mojave Desert. The evidence that pointed straight to Chase Merritt. How investigators finally cracked the case. 3 years after the McStay family disappeared, the case had gone cold. No leads. No breakthroughs. No answers. Then, on November 11, 2013, a lone motorcyclist riding through a desolate stretch of the Mojave Desert made a discovery that would change everything. Half buried in the sand, he spotted human remains. Authorities have confirmed the discovery of 2 shallow graves containing the remains of 4 people. The identities have not been officially released, but investigators suspect they may belong to the missing McStay family. The bodies were buried in a remote area, approximately 100 miles from the McStay home. Whoever did this wanted to make sure they were never found. As forensic teams worked through the site, dental records confirmed what many had feared. The remains belonged to Joseph McStay, his wife Summer, and their 2 young sons, Johnny and Joseph Jr. It is with a heavy heart that we announce the remains found in Victorville, California, have been positively identified as the McStay family. We prayed for a miracle, but this is not what we wanted to hear. My brother and his family didn't deserve this. The discovery of the bodies was only the beginning. Now, investigators needed to understand how the McStay family had been murdered, and why. Autopsies revealed that all 4 victims had been brutally beaten to death. The murder weapon. A sledgehammer found buried with the remains. The positioning of the bodies told its own story. Joseph and Summer were found in one grave. Their sons were buried beside them in another. The way they had been placed was disturbing. This was an act of extreme violence. The injuries were severe, indicating that the victims suffered repeated blows. This was not a quick or impulsive act. It was calculated. Intentional. Whoever committed this crime didn't just want the McStays dead. They wanted them erased. The forensic evidence painted a horrifying picture. This wasn't a random act of violence. The killer had targeted the McStay family specifically. This was personal. The overkill, the sheer force used, suggests the perpetrator had a deep, emotional connection to the victims. This wasn't a simple robbery. This was rage. And that's when all eyes turned to one man. A man who had everything to gain from Joseph McStay's disappearance. A man who had lied to investigators from the beginning. And a man whose own past held secrets darker than anyone had imagined. This section will cover the financial transactions that exposed Chase Merritt. The evidence that linked him to the crime. His arrest and trial. Charles Chase Merritt was not a stranger to the McStay family. He was Joseph McStay's business partner, a skilled metalworker who collaborated with Joseph on custom water fountains. To the outside world, he was a trusted associate, someone Joseph relied on, someone he called a friend. But as investigators dug deeper, they found cracks in that relationship. Financial stress. Missed deadlines. Betrayal. And an undeniable motive for murder. Chase was always around. My brother trusted him. I never would have imagined he could do something like this. On the surface, the McStay family's disappearance seemed random. But when investigators examined Joseph's business finances, an alarming pattern emerged. In the days leading up to Joseph's disappearance, multiple checks were written from his business account to Charles Merritt. Over $21,000 in forged transactions. What stood out was that these checks were backdated, written after the McStay family had already vanished. This meant one of two things: either Joseph McStay was still alive and personally issuing checks while in hiding, or someone was trying to cover their tracks. Joseph McStay didn't sign those checks. But Chase Merritt did. The financial evidence was damning, but investigators needed something more. A smoking gun. That's when they turned to forensic science. DNA tests revealed something chilling. Chase Merritt's DNA was found on the McStay family's vehicle. A car that had been abandoned near the Mexican border. A car that Chase Merritt claimed he had never touched. The DNA evidence was crucial. It placed Chase Merritt inside the vehicle, contradicting his statements. He was lying. For years of investigation. For years of unanswered questions. And then, finally, an arrest. Charles Chase Merritt was taken into custody and charged with 4 counts of first-degree murder. We believe that Charles Merritt acted alone in the brutal murder of Joseph, Summer, and their 2 young sons. This was a crime motivated by greed, and we intend to seek the maximum penalty. I don't understand. Chase ate dinner at our house. He was supposed to be my brother's friend. How do you do something like this? The man who had sat at their table, who had worked alongside Joseph, had allegedly beaten them to death with a sledgehammer. And he almost got away with it. 9 years after the McStay family vanished, and 5 years after Charles Chase Merritt's arrest, the case finally reached the courtroom. The trial commenced on January 7, 2019, inside a San Bernardino County courthouse. The charges? 4 counts of first-degree murder. The stakes? Life in prison or death. The prosecution had a mountain of evidence: DNA, financial records, cell phone data, and Merritt's own inconsistent statements. But the defense had a singular goal: to create doubt. And in a death penalty case, even a sliver of doubt could mean the difference between life and death. Prosecutors wasted no time painting Chase Merritt as a man drowning in financial trouble, desperate for money, and willing to kill to erase his debts. They revealed Merritt's extensive gambling addiction, proving that within days of the murders, he withdrew thousands of dollars at California casinos, money stolen from Joseph McStay's business. This was not a random act of violence. This was not a robbery gone wrong. This was calculated, deliberate, and cold-blooded. Charles Merritt executed an entire family to cover his tracks. We recovered DNA belonging to Charles Merritt on the McStay family's Isuzu Trooper. This directly places him inside their vehicle, contradicting his previous statements. And then there was the damning cell phone data. Investigators presented records proving that on the night the McStay family vanished, Chase Merritt's phone was traced traveling to the very location where their bodies would later be found. His alibi? Non-existent. The defense knew the odds were stacked against them. But they also knew something else. No murder weapon was ever recovered, no security footage captured the crime, and there were no direct eyewitnesses. This was all circumstantial. My client is sitting here today because the investigators refused to look any further. They found a convenient suspect, and they stopped digging. The defense once again raised the theory that the McStay family had willingly traveled to Mexico and met an unknown fate there. They also suggested that Joseph McStay had other business associates who may have had their own reasons to harm him. And then, the final play, Merritt himself took the stand. He pleaded his innocence, claiming he was being framed and that the Real killers were still out there. It was a risky move, having him testify. He was emotional, at times defiant. But in the end, it didn't work.
The first-degree murder of Gianni McStay and the first-degree murder of Joseph McStay Jr. That the defendant, Charles Merritt, be sentenced to death.
Had just begun. Family members took the stand to share their grief. Their loss. The horror of knowing that Joseph, Summer, Johnny, and Joseph Jr. spent their final moments in terror. Judge Michael A. Smith, Mr. Merritt, the evidence against you is overwhelming. You showed no mercy to this family, and today, this court shows no mercy to you. You are sentenced to death. The ultimate sentence. Charles Merritt was sent to San Quentin's death row, where he remains to this day, awaiting execution. The McStay family's deaths were more than just a shocking crime, they were a devastating loss that sent shockwaves through their family, friends, and community. The reality that Joseph, Summer, and their two innocent children were buried in the desert for years without answers left a wound that would never fully heal. I wanted to believe they were still out there somewhere. That maybe they had just started over. But when the truth came, it was worse than any nightmare I could have imagined. For years, the McStay home remained frozen in time, a painful reminder of a family that once lived, loved, and dreamed within its walls. Their disappearance had been a mystery that haunted Fallbrook, a tight-knit community where crime was rare and doors were left unlocked. The realization that their neighbor, their friend, their child's playmate had been brutally murdered left a sense of unease that never truly faded. We always hoped for a happy ending. This wasn't it. 2025, Charles Chase Merritt remains on death row at San Quentin State Prison. Over 4 years after his sentencing, Chase Merritt remains on California's death row. His attorneys have launched appeals, arguing that the trial was unfair and the evidence against him was circumstantial. But for the McStay family's loved ones, there is no doubt. He stole them from us. And now, he has to live with what he did. I don't care how long it takes, justice was served. Despite the conviction, some questions remain. Was Chase Merritt truly the only one involved? Were there other hands in this crime that went unnoticed? And perhaps most chilling of all, what were the final moments of the McStay family like? Did they suffer? Did they fight back? Did they know it was coming? Some answers may never come. But one thing remains certain, the McStay family's story is one of unimaginable betrayal, senseless violence, and a community left forever changed. Even with a conviction, the McStay family case remains riddled with unanswered questions, puzzles that continue to haunt investigators, legal experts, and those who followed the case closely. Did the prosecution truly uncover the full story? Or were there pieces left out, pieces that could change everything? The state built a strong case against Charles Chase Merritt, but the biggest issue has always been the lack of direct physical evidence linking him to the crime scene. There was DNA in the vehicle, financial fraud, and a motive, but no eyewitness, no security footage, no concrete proof placing him at the murder site. Without a definitive smoking gun, skeptics argue that the case relied heavily on circumstantial evidence. And where doubt lingers, so do theories. Could Chase Merritt have acted alone? Or were there others involved, individuals who helped commit or cover up the crime, yet never faced justice? The McStay family was not just murdered, they were brutally bludgeoned and transported to a remote desert grave. That's not something easily done by one person. Moving 4 bodies, digging graves in a secluded location, and making sure they remain undiscovered for years. It raises questions. Some investigators believe the case was closed too soon. That authorities may have overlooked key individuals who had the means, the motive, and the knowledge to assist in the crime. One of the most perplexing aspects of this case is the timeline itself. If the family was murdered on February 4, 2010, why was their vehicle found days later at the Mexican border? Who drove it there? And why? The footage is grainy, the figures unidentifiable. Many close to the case do not believe this was actually the McStay family. If that's true, then who were they? And why was this red herring never fully explained? Theories suggest the car may have been staged at the border to mislead investigators, to make it seem as though the McStays left voluntarily. If that's the case, then who was behind it? And why? The prosecution painted Merritt as a desperate man, an associate who was drowning in debt and saw Joseph McStay's business as his last lifeline. But was money the only reason this crime occurred? Or was there something deeper beneath the surface? There were people outside of Chase Merritt who had financial disputes with Joseph McStay. Were those ever fully explored? Or was the focus so heavily placed on Merritt that other possibilities were ignored? Perhaps the most haunting question of all, did the McStay family see it coming? Were they lured somewhere under false pretenses? Did they fight back? Were the children spared from the horror, or forced to witness it? What haunts me most is the sheer brutality of it. This wasn't an accidental killing, this was methodical. It was rage-filled. Whoever did this, they didn't just want to kill. They wanted to erase. The McStay case was solved in the eyes of the law. But for those who followed the case closely, for those who knew and loved the family, the questions remain. And perhaps, they always will. If you or someone you know has any information that could shed new light on this case, contact the San Bernardino County Sheriff's Department. And as always, remember, justice is never truly complete until every question is answered.